My name is Seth Christensen. This is the Got Any Cows podcast. As Jonathan LaRue says, I may not know anything about anything else, but I do know a lot about cows.
You know cows.
I'm excited to be here today on another episode of the Got Any Cows podcast. I am lucky today to be here with my grandfather. I'm here with Verl Christensen, and we're actually in the old family farmhouse recording today. This is the home that Grandpa was born in. This is the home that I was raised in. This is the home my father and mother currently live in. And this is the farm where I was raised. So excited to talk with Grandpa today and learn a little bit from him about the story of a family farm that has lasted for generations. It's an opportunity I'm grateful for to have been raised in this setting. And it's thanks to the work of my father, my grandfather, his father, and even his father prior to that. So excited to hear some of the story of how the farm came to be and then how it lasted through generations from my grandpa Verl. So Verl, if you would, give us a little bit of an introduction on yourself.
Okay, as far as myself, this house that we're in, I was born in it, in a room just right over here. My parents, Joseph and Goldie Christensen, bought this house after their store and home had burned down on the corner. And as far as the being here in Benida, there's so many different stories and so many different viewpoints as far as how people settled here. But one of the major parts of the stories of living here had to do with the Homestead Act, where people could go and homestead in the various areas. One in the Benida area where my grandpa Jetty came up and homesteaded. Another up in the central Idaho area, that's near Grace, where my grandfather Christensen, Ferdinand and Elsie Marie, where they homesteaded, and that's where my father was born. But it was people looking for some place to go to have some economic opportunity, and obviously it's a time of many different qualities of property, qualities of land, the economics of it, the availability of water, whether it's for the cattle or whether it's for the crops, or even for drinking water. The areas that we went into it was called Poverty Flat for good reason. And my grandparents came here. My mother was 3 years old, and she was born in 1905. My grandparents, Jetty and Myra Miles, they came here as homesteading. And when my mother talks about when she came here, there was not a tree in Benida. There was no running water to speak of through the area. The only water that came into Benida was from the Fox Hollow, which was not a very reliable stream. And they had to come and settle. Of course, they'd have to bring their cattle. For some reason, there wasn't a Costco on the corner, and I can't figure it out. You know, they couldn't go down to the store and go buy them a loaf of bread or Pepsi or whatever. They had to put things together on their own. And they had to have their own animals. They had to have their own chickens, had to have their own ways of sustaining their livelihood. And obviously, all of them had a cow or two that they could get the milk, have some chickens, have the whatever animals they might need, whether it's pigs, whether it's sheep, or whatever. But getting water for those animals was a real problem. So they started digging wells. And that is where the original water came from, before there was any irrigation water. And they were trying, like my mother talked about when she was just very young, seeing all the sagebrush around. And I was taller than she was. So of course, she's 5 years old, so it wouldn't have to be very tall. But anyway, what they had to do to clear off the sagebrush. Sagebrush doesn't even make very good firewood.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
something that just burns in a hurry. And they cleared the land so that they could start farming. And of course, most of the farming was done with a 2-horse plow. I mean, 2 horses literally. And they were doing it, and they didn't have the modern equipment or anything like it, like we have now. And it was a hard, hard life. But people were doing it because they wanted to get away and to have some self-reliance and to take care of themselves and their families. And that was part of the reason of coming to the Bonita area, coming to the central area where my father was born. And it was, people were settling, and some were successful, most were not.
Right, right. I think that's part of what makes the story as neat as it is all of the work and effort put into building the farm and then into keeping it intact through generations. And like you said, there wasn't anything here. You know, it wasn't you come in and it's already built or it's already established. It was breaking the ground out and then starting those farms, like you mentioned with your mother's family. And then on your father's side, so your grandfather, Ferdinand, he came out of Denmark, right?
Yeah, both he and his wife were born in Denmark, and they came over at a young age, early teens.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. And how did they end up in Central? And then how did Grandpa Joe come from there down here to Bonita?
Well, as I've just pieced things together over the years, that Grandpa and Grandma were, married. They're married to Logan Temple, actually. But they were going around, and he was a shoemaker.
Oh, really?
And he
This is Grandpa
apprenticed in
Ferdinand.
Denmark to do that.
Okay.
But he described it as the business being dull. And he just couldn't make much money doing it because people didn't have money. And he was working on different things. He worked on the Logan Temple some. He worked on the Oneida State Academy. In fact, he fell off the Oneida State Academy and got severely injured. And then after that, they found out that there was some land available up in the central area, and they went up there to homestead. And because of that, there were many of his posterity who were very successful as far as the farming game goes. They were just able to, they had the work ethic and how to take care of themselves. Like one of the problems up in Central was they had no drinking water, and they would have to go down to the river, which was 7 miles away, load up their barrels on a trailer and bring it back so they'd have drinking water. And they didn't have any wells. And in fact, my father was born when the Last Chance Canal was digging a tunnel through the hill there. That was at the time when my father was born, trying to get irrigation water and other water to the central area. And it was successful because there are many successful farms there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But anyway, my father was the 8th of 10 children. And anyway, he's very good with money, but he had the opportunity of buying into the Christensen Mercantile down in Bonita. And his brother John had come down, and he was running the store for a while. My father had a chance to buy into the store, which he did. Of course, my Uncle John thought that if the good Lord was going to give the world an enemy, he'd do it in Bonita. But anyway, he was not impressed with the area. But Dad had come down and bought into the store. And that's when he met my mother, and it was just down on the corner from where this house was. And they had the post office there. They had the little country store there, even sold gasoline. But it was an interesting thing how all that worked. My mother was very generous as far as, I guess you'd call it charging some of the goods to the people around who were having trouble financially, and probably one of the best financial moves my dad ever made was to have the store burned down because Mom would give away all the profits.
Yeah. Yep.
But it was an interesting time. But that's when my dad coming down for the store, that's when he met my mother. And she was a very talented young lady, musically especially. But then they were married, and then they were living down on what we call the corner, just down where Peter and Linda Evans built that house. And they had a small dairy. My mother was very good with dairy animals or any kind of animals. In fact, she was, in essence, the town doctor. I don't know how many babies she delivered.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she was very good at healing, very good at taking care of animals, taking care of people. And I can even remember a couple of babies that she helped deliver when I was just a young man.
Really?
But it was an interesting time. But anyway, after the store burned down, they bought the home here where I was born. That would have been 1937, something like that. But they had a small piece of property that was behind the store, and it was behind the house where I live now. It was, 7 or 8 acres, something like that. And then they had the opportunity of buying what we call the pasture piece. It was called the Booker piece, but Dad started acquiring farm ground because of people were financially just losing out. It was the Depression time. That's when they had bread lines but the farmers couldn't sell their wheat for anything because nobody had money to buy it. And there was just a complete breakdown on the, you might call a supply chain. And so they had to be self-sufficient, but people were not able to pay for their mortgages on their farms. And Dad started buying a little piece here, a little piece there, and till the farm started growing. And then Dad was very innovative, and he was very good with mechanics. He could fix about anything with a pair of pliers and some baling wire. And he was just really, really gifted that way. So he could make the machinery work. He had the first wheel tractor in the area. He had some of the first combines. He had the first self-propelled combine in the area because he could see the advantages of them. But the farm kept growing, just over the years, like the Winter place, like the Humphrey place, and then like the what we call the Jensen place, and then I forget how many places he had. South Hill, there was, but he always had the motto that if you can't pay for it, don't buy it. And which some people, they don't follow that motto very well, even now. But they'd just go from piece to piece, and over the years, Dad had a milk route. He would haul milk, and of course we had a few dairy cows, and then that expanded to more dairy cows and more dairy cows. And anyway, he was just one who was always looking for a way to improve his life and his children's life.
Mm-hmm.
And
when he came in, he wouldn't have had any farm ground at all coming out of Central.
He came down with nothing.
Yeah, right.
Well, he came down part ownership in that store.
Yeah, yep. And then
that's what brought him down.
Yeah, and running the store, running the milk route, running the dairy.
But see, the milk route wasn't here when he came.
Yeah.
He had to develop that.
Right.
And then everybody had a few cows, 1 or 2. I mean, a big herd was 5.
Mm-hmm.
They milk them by hand. And those darn cows, they wanted to be milked on Sunday, and they wanted to be milked on holidays, and they didn't take time off for Christmas.
Yeah.
And it was a lifestyle a lot of people didn't want.
Sure. How many dairies would there have been here in Benida at that point in time?
Oh, let's see. When I was hauling milk as a young man, Between here and Winder, I had 14 stops with the milk truck
Here in Benida.
in Benida and Roscoe.
Okay, yep. And they were hauling it all in cans at
It
that
was
point in time?
all in cans. I mean, we didn't know what a tank was.
Right, yep.
It was in cans, and I'd be able to, well, it was a weight program for me. I was able to get pretty, I guess you might say, buff at the time.
Yeah.
And I didn't think so. I think, anyway, won't get into that.
Don't worry, Grandma's not here to edit the story. You can say whatever you want.
Well, anyway, she thinks most of my stories end with I.
I like your stories, but that's one of the things I appreciate about the story with Grandpa Joe at large is that he didn't come in and have any of it already there. Came in and put it all together by hustling and having those enterprises that you've talked about to put him in a position to buy when most people weren't in a position to buy. There are a lot of people losing farms at that point.
They were losing it. He didn't buy one farm from the individual. It was all from the banks.
Right. Yep. No, that makes sense.
And he was very good at managing his money.
Mm-hmm. What other enterprises did he have going? You've mentioned the dairy and the milk route, and he'd had the store prior.
At the post office.
Had the post office, yep.
And that was just right over here. You just go see the postal boxes or whatever they are.
What were you saying the zip code was? There was a zip code for Benida at that point, wasn't there?
83264.
Yeah, yep.
A lot better than 82363. A lot easier to remember.
A lot easier, you bet. So yeah, tell us about some of the different equipment and stuff like that. You've mentioned some of the different farms he acquired as he went along. Tell us about how the equipment changed over the years from the 2-bottom plow behind a horse that you mentioned in the beginning. How did that evolve through the time that Grandpa Joe had the farm?
Oh, let's see. The equipment, as far as the tillage equipment goes, I can remember a 3-bottom plow. That was pretty big. And then we got a 4-bottom plow. And then we got a 5-bottom plow. And that was huge at the time. Mm-hmm. And I'd spend a lot of time on the tractors. In fact, I have a picture of me as a boy. I had to stand up so I could see over the steering wheel. Yeah. And but we were pulling a 5-bottom plow. And we do a lot of plowing. And then they started into the tillage with chisel plows, which was, they were 12 feet at the time. Man, that was wide. Mm-hmm. And then it went to 15 feet, and however big they are now. And we would do a lot of chisel plowing because that would not, you didn't lose as much moisture. And it gave a place for the moisture to go over the winter. Mm-hmm. We did what they call a lot of summer following at the time, where we would crop it one year, and then we'd summer follow the next year to conserve the moisture, and then we would crop it the following year. Yeah. And it was, as far as the combines go, the earliest combines I remember were some internationals, and they had a 12-foot cut. And then and these were self-propelled combines. In fact, my dad bought the first self-propelled combines in the whole area. Mm-hmm. And but they were open air and open whatever, and it was not pleasant to run them sometimes if the wind was wrong. Mm-hmm. Especially with my allergies and my dad's allergies and so forth. Sure. But he made sure they went. Yeah. And he was very good at fixing things and making things go. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you had to. They say that you can tell how good a mechanic it is by how old the combine is. So.
You bet. Looking at your dad, so I ought to mention your father, Joseph. My middle name is Joseph for him, and then my son's name is Joseph for him. So obviously I have a lot of respect for what he did. What would you say were maybe some of the keys for him as he put together the farm that's then made it through generations since? What do you think were some of the keys to how he accomplished that?
First off, I think the major key is financially, he could see end to it that he could get it paid for in a short period of time. And it wouldn't be the whole, everything have to go to that farm. And I don't know what the selling price was on some of it, but the bankers would come to him. If somebody would lose their farm, they would come to him and he would have the opportunity of buying farms.
Right.
And one of the interesting things with my father, with his being, in the milk hauling business and whatever else, cars and so forth, when they put Highway 91 through here, there was debating on whether to run the highway down the west side, down through Oxford and Clifton and Dayton and over to Preston, or to come a more direct route through this area to get to Preston from Red Rock Pass to Preston. Anyway, Dad sold the rights for the people to come through, or for the state to come through and put the road in for $1, and it went through at least 5 of our farms. But he sold it for $1 because he could see the advantage of transportation and see the advantage of being able to get goods and get services from one piece to another. And it was, I think, a major portion of the development of this area, being able to move our goods out in an economical manner.
Right. You bet.
And Dad did a lot of trucking.
Right.
And he did a lot of custom cutting on the wheat and so forth. And for that matter, one of the first pieces of equipment my father bought, as far as the run off a tractor, was it was a 7-foot PTO-driven mower that'd go behind a tractor. And they would run that thing night and day because it was so much better than the horse-drawn. And people would line up just to have him come and cut their hay because it was so much more efficient and so much quicker and better quality hay. And that was one of the pieces of machinery that Dad had bought and that no one else had.
Right. And I think that's one of the things I've respected about Grandpa Joe and all the different stories that you've told me over the years about him is, what was the saying that you always say, if I can't work for $1, I'll work for 50 cents, something like that, as far as, just willing to work. And then all those different enterprises he was willing to take on, given that he wasn't in a scenario where there was already a farm, but that he did go and do the dairy and the milk route and the post office and the store and the grain trucking, and then this custom cutting and things like that, like you've mentioned, was willing to take on all those different opportunities. And that's what allowed him to put together the farm, or be in a position to buy.
Oh yeah, he had at the time probably the best equipment around, best available.
Yep.
And I remember as a kid, some of the best times I'd have with my dad was, if something would break down, we'd have to go wherever to get parts for that piece of machinery, and that's the only time I could be with my dad alone. I thought that was great.
Right. Yeah, I say, and very, very innovative. I mean, everything from the plows to the mowers to the combines to the different kinds of tractors. Chisel plow. Yeah, all those different things. Very innovative in that sense. So once he kind of had the farm put together, and then how did you start, I guess, come back to the farm? What did that look like for you to return to the farm and then eventually become the owner and manager of it?
Well, it was, at the time, let's see, when did I came back to the farm essentially when I got through with the mission to the New England states. I'd come back, and I'd been in Boston long enough that I was going to do anything I could to not live in the city.
Not be in Boston.
So anyway, and my dad was getting older at the time, and it was and just coming back, and Dad obviously needed help at the time, and then we just started working together. But it was interesting with my dad, and just how many of his nephews and some nieces, but mostly nephews or grandnephews or whatever, had come and worked on the farm, and Dad helped raise them. Like, for example, I call him my brother, Blaine Olson. His mother passed away when he was about 5 years old, something like that. And Blaine was living in Ogden at the time, and well, Dad went down and saw opened their fridge up, and the thing was completely bare. And anyway, it ended up that Blaine ended up coming up, staying one summer with us because he's getting in trouble down in Ogden when he's 10 years old. Never went back to Ogden. He was even here when I was born. And I couldn't figure out why my brother Blaine had the name of Olson.
Right.
Hey guys, this is Seth Christensen with the Got Any Cows podcast. I wanted to give you guys a personal invitation to check out our website. That's gotanycows.com. Gotanycows.com is going to take you to the Christensen Genetics website. On that website, we've got a couple of different things that I would like you to take advantage of. One of the first tabs that you'll see there across the top on the Christensen Genetics website is the podcast tab. You can find any and all of the episodes that have been released there along with full video. The next tab over would be the Learn tab. The point of everything on this tab would be to help educate somebody that maybe doesn't have cattle yet, help you prepare to be ready to own your own cows. We help people on a regular basis establish new herds, build a quality set of cattle. The Learn tab is all about being ready for cattle ownership. The next tab that you'll see on the top of the website there is the Build Your Herd tab. This is going to have our current sale inventory on it. It'll have everything from semen and embryos to females, bulls, all of the above. It's all there. There's going to be pictures there. There's going to be registration links there. There's going to be pricing there. All of the live animals on christensengenetics.com come with free delivery anywhere in the continental United States included. So if you decide to purchase any of these animals, all you have to do is click the click to buy button that is included on each of those listings. That'll send an email to us. We'll send an invoice to you. Once you pay that invoice, we'll go ahead and schedule a brand inspection, a health inspection, and shipment to your ranch. And then after that, the next tab is the Run Your Ranch tab. So this would be where you can find information on what to do when you receive those animals, vaccination protocols, nutrition recommendations, calving recommendations, shipping, marketing, anything that you might need to do once you own the cattle. So the whole point of this website at large of gotanycows.com is meant to help you prepare to own cows, purchase the best cows you can possibly get, and then know what to do with them. So I'd invite you guys to take advantage of that resource. We built it for you. It's there to use. Please go ahead and visit gotanycows.com. Be sure to subscribe at the bottom of the page, and you'll receive updates as things are added to the site. Again, that's gotanycows.com, and we'll see you there.
But I can think of about at least 5 of my cousins who didn't live in the area at all, who Mom and Dad would come and they'd keep them for the summer and give them work. They're able to work and learn how to work. I mean, Dad needed the help.
Right.
But those family members needed help more than Dad did.
Right. And I think that's a benefit that's been provided right down through the generations, because Grandpa Joe put a farm together. It wasn't just a farm for Grandpa Joe. It was a farm for you. It was a farm for those cousins. It's been a farm for, all of your children, including my father. It's been a farm for me. And so that's where I do, just hold him in the highest regard for having done that work he did. And then everything you've done to maintain it. And then my father after you, because of the opportunity that's provided, to learn to work and to be raised on a farm, I think is a real blessing and an opportunity that I credit back to the people before me.
Yeah, it was anyway, my father was very concerned about his children and any of the others, that they would have ways of making a living for themselves. First, he taught them the work ethic.
Right.
And when you have cows, you need to be with them every day. And it's not something you can take off on Thanksgiving Day or for whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They've
There's
got to be
always
taken
somebody
care
in 'em.
of.
Yep. So looking at when you started coming back to the farm and working with your dad and things like that, how did you guys structure getting the farm transition from him to you? And then what changes did you make as far as the dairy, the milk route, and then the acquisitions you made, things like that?
Well, with the milk route, there became a change. I hauled milk for quite a few years, and but there became a change of their going to the tanks with the pipeline milkers and so forth. They could have bigger herds, could take care of them with, in a lot of ways, with less labor, and yet they could milk them and have them taken care of. And so that, in essence, that ruined the. Shouldn't say ruined it, but it just outdated the canned milk.
Yep.
And at that time, also, well, all the way through, there's generational changes. People see they didn't want to be tied down to a herd of cows or this, that, what, and the other, and so the next generation didn't get them.
Right.
And so it was just a transition. In essence, the milk route died.
Right.
And that was fine. I mean, that's just the way life is.
Yep. Yep.
But and then as far as a lot of the labor on the farms and so forth, with the bigger equipment, you didn't need as much labor. And the different farming practices, I mean, there's bigger equipment, bigger combines, bigger tractors, bigger diggers, and the moldboard plows, they're extinct about. And gone to different methods of farming, and it's
What is a moldboard plow? I'm not sure I know, to be honest.
You've seen the 5-bottom plows around, or 4-bottom. That's called a moldboard plow.
Gotcha.
It turns the dirt right over, and the ground after you moldboard plow it is more prone to erosion because there is nothing holding it together.
Right. Right.
And it's a where you dig it, or even go to the what you call chemical fallow now, where you don't dig it, you have the stalks growing in the ground to help stop the erosion.
Right.
And that is a big factor on some of our farms, is erosion. It's very and one thing about it, when that topsoil erodes off, it's gone.
Yeah. Yep. 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 And I think, one of the things that I've always admired about your management of the farm, Grandpa, is that you managed right through the 80s. And for me, studying, I studied economics and agribusiness at Utah State, and one of your case studies is the 1980s, the farm credit crunch, and interest rates skyrocketed. A lot of folks lost a lot of farms, and you not only maintained the farm, you expanded it, and you fed 8 kids with just the farm. What would you, I guess, credit that to, as to how you went about all that?
Well, for one thing, the farm wasn't what you'd call real expensive comparatively, because my father wanted to have his posterity continue on,
Right.
being able to do it. He didn't have to make the $10,000 an acre bit.
Right. Yep.
He didn't even have to make the $400 an acre bit. I mean, and it's his main deal is that he was very concerned about his family,
Yep.
his children, his grandchildren, and so forth. And it was families were just very important to him.
Yeah.
And but one of the major things he taught his children and grandchildren, the ones that would listen, is to take care of what you've got. And to use it to get advantage. Mm-hmm. Plus, he was not what you'd call an educated man. He was graduated from school up in Central from the 8th grade. He did it in 6 years because he skipped 2 grades. Mm-hmm. It's the only opportunity he had for education. And anyway, he was a real proponent of us being educated. It wasn't a choice for us to be not go to college. I mean, every one of his children went to college. It'd be interesting to know how many of his offspring were college graduates. But that was he wanted to make sure that they had the opportunity. Well, for example, my dad later on went up to a school up in Pocatello, went up there for 3 months. It was auto mechanics and, engines, whatever, take care of that. And it was just a mechanical program. Went up and stayed up there 3 months, but halfway through the program, the teacher got sick and couldn't continue the course, so they had my dad teach it for the rest of the course.
You bet.
Because one of the things my dad was very concerned about his children is that they learn how to read, and they learn how to write their name so you can read it. And he was very concerned about the way his children and grandchildren did as far as their education goes.
Right. You bet. So looking at your management of the farm, the Glendale piece, would you walk us through the story of that Glendale acquisition?
Well, the Glendale was really quite an interesting story, and my dad had a lot to do with that, and he'd passed away at the time I bought the Glendale property. At that time frame, we were hauling some wheat down to the central mill in Logan. That's in the middle of Logan, and quite frankly, I'd hate to drive a truck through the center of Logan, or anything through the center of Logan today.
Yeah.
But I was driving this load of wheat down and we just finished dumping it and was going back into the office to get my tickets and whatever, showing what I had done. And this young man came in and talked to the owner of the Central Mill, whose name was Jim Weston. He came in and talked to him, and he was wondering, and Weston's owned quite a bit of property, farm ground. I don't know where it was at, but they did own quite a bit. And wondering if he would be interested in buying his grandpa's farm. And I found out that the name was Nelson, and they lived. I'd never been to Glendale in my life. I'd heard about it a little bit, but hadn't ever been there. But anyway, I found out that this Verl Nelson was the one who was going to sell his farm, and I had probably about maybe a 10-minute window when that boy came in and talked to him when I was down in that store, or down in that office. But anyway, I called up Verl Nelson, and Verl Nelson was 92 years old at the time that I bought the farm, and he had been born on that farm. So you can imagine what it was like as far as his heritage. But I called him up, and I told him that my name was Verl Christensen, and I was from Benida, and told him that Joseph Christensen was my father, and then mentioned some of the other people around here that he might have known, but that Joe Christensen was my father. And he says, "Oh yeah, Joe, he's a good man. Let's talk." So I went out and I met Verl Nelson and went and took him up to the farm, and he showed me the farm, and I saw those hills. I thought, holy, I don't want this place. But then I got up on top of the hill there and saw the Nelson place, what we call the Glendale place now. And it was beautiful. And anyway, we talked about it, and the price that he had on the farm was reasonable. The interest rate was reasonable. We had a 10-year contract, and I made all the payments to him except 1 year's. We'd make, so he lived to be 101. But I would never have gotten that farm had he not known my father, Joe. And anyway, he said, he's a good man. Let's talk.
Right.
And I had that farm about within 2 days.
Yeah.
Of course, I didn't have to go through any real estate agent,
Right.
which helped.
And I do think, there's such value in that reputation. I mean, if Grandpa Joe had had a poor reputation, it could have shut that deal down before it ever started, but because he had a good reputation as an honest man, that opened that deal up and made that one possible.
I'd never have gotten it if I hadn't been Dad's son.
Right. Yep. And I think that's a key takeaway as I look at how that farm came together was due to those different enterprises running and the way Grandpa was in a position to buy when others weren't, and then he was able to provide that opportunity to you to continue farming, but along with that reputation to be able to build upon the farm there. So going back to the 1980s and going through that window where so many lost farms and interest rates got really high, how did those high interest rates impact you, and how did you hold on to the farm when other people were eaten up by those high interest rates?
Well, you mean with the Glendale place?
Well, just with the farm at large, how did you keep it intact when so many lost farms through the 1980s with high interest rates?
Well, one of the farms that what we call Wade's place that I bought, I bought it from my brother Wade, and I can't remember exactly the year, but it was anyway. I went through the land bank or whatever's in Preston, and the interest rate was 7% when I started, and all of a sudden they jumped it to 13%, and so I was about halfway through in paying for the farm at that time frame, and with that high of interest rate, I thought, well, I'll never get this farm paid for, because you'd pay so much. So we'd pay so much on the balance that was left and then the interest on it. And so I would double the principal payment, and I had that paid off in 3 years, and it really ticked off the farm credit out because I got it paid for.
Right. Yep.
But I had to double my principal payment to do it. And that was kind of a challenging time.
Yeah. No, I'd imagine. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that was one of the few farms I bought that outside of the of my dad.
Right. Yep. Now as you look at my dad running the farm, and stepping into that management role, what do you think have been the keys to success as you've passed on the farm that your father passed to you, and then that you've been able to provide the opportunity for my father to operate the farm? What would you say are some of the keys to making that work and keeping it intact instead of having the farm fall apart at that generational transition?
Well, for one thing, your dad wanted the farm. That was a big part of it. He was very desirous to run a farm, and he's good at it. And but I wanted to make that transition to your dad so that he could do it, but also that I would be taken care of, and it's worked out well. And it's something that, as far as the equipment goes, I mean, I didn't charge anything for the equipment, just continued on. But he's changed over to a completely different style of equipment than what I ran, and a different method of farming. Of course, he had some good education. He knew about the fertilization. He knew about the what chemicals work good and what don't, and how much, and so forth. And it's made a big difference.
Yep. Well, and it's been interesting. I mean, each of you down through those generations have had to operate the farm differently to keep it going. Each of you has run the same farm, but in different ways, in different times. So that's been interesting to watch, and I just appreciate, the opportunity it's provided for me, even though I farm separately, and on my own piece over there in Weston, and we run the cattle independent from the family farm. but the opportunity that's been provided for me to have grown up here, to have been grown up around farming, to have grown up around crops, to have grown up learning how to work and move pipe, and to have the opportunity, I was able to raise some of my first calves years ago, where Grandpa Joe and Grandma Goldie would have had the milk cows that then passed on to you. Some of my first calves were raised right there at the family dairy when I was 11 years old, or where the dairy had been, I should say.
Yeah,
So that's been a blessing to me.
but the dairy was an integral part of it, because the dairy, I mean, you might not make a lot of money, but it is consistent.
Yeah.
And you have, it's more consistent than raising beef cattle. Because beef cattle's up and down and
Sure.
whatever, but the dairy was pretty stable.
Yep. And I look at that, and I just, anyway, couldn't be more grateful for the opportunities that have been provided me to learn from the people that came ahead of me, and then to have the opportunity to be raised on the family farm, and then just to apply some of those lessons in my life. You know what I mean? I think enough of the people ahead of me. That's both of my boys are Miles and Joseph, which would be your father and then your mother's maiden name there. And so that's, anyway, a neat legacy, and one that I'm proud to carry on. Is there anything in particular, Grandpa, that you would like to add as far as thoughts for anyone that's maybe trying to build a farm, a new farm, first generation farm, maintain one, or pass it along to their children? Any advice you'd give to someone in those settings?
Oh, I look at the cost of land now, and I look at the cost of equipment now, and I wonder if a person doesn't have to have a lobotomy to try and farm.
Yeah. It's a challenging environment, no doubt.
I mean, as far as the farming goes now, it's turned into mega farms, a lot of big farms.
Yep.
And I don't know, but the major thing is just, well, the cost of fuel, the cost of fertilizer, the cost of anything else you do with them, cost of equipment is a real challenge.
Yeah.
And maintaining that equipment is a greater challenge.
Absolutely. And it's kind of almost an era now where it is either specialty or scale. You can either be really, really big, these mega farms like you're talking about that are more engaged in the commodities, or you can be specialized in some way, shape, or form, which is the approach I've taken with registered cattle and with beef cattle genetics as a specialty product versus just commodity beef in that setting.
And it's, I don't know, we become a society as a whole where we're not able to produce much of anything locally. Look on your shoes and see where they're made.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Where's Jacob's shoes made?
Let's say any of our shoes. My shoes are sitting by the door because they're covered in mud, but I can tell you for sure they weren't sewn next door.
I mean, it's I'll make both you boys a challenge to go find you a pair of shoes made in the United States.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Like I bought some floor shimes, and I thought that was a U.S. name. They're made in India.
Well, and I look at it, I think that's one of the reasons there's been some people that have really wanted to return to that, producing some of their own food or producing some of their own beef or engaging in agriculture in some way, shape, or form, is because it's a little disconcerting. You look at COVID and how quickly that emptied store shelves. There wasn't food to buy. And I think, that is a real eye-opener to folks as far as how fragile supply chains can be, and what a neat thing it is to be able to raise some of your own food or to be able to produce some of your own food.
And that is, it's just really a blessing if you can raise your own food, whether it's the animal part of it, whether it's the garden part of it. I mean, as I go down to Logan, we go down there quite regularly, and I look at how many row houses there are there, and I don't see any way of them having a garden at all.
Right, yeah, not even an option in that setting.
Smithfield now.
Yep, just right down the road.
And they can't become, quote, self-sufficient. they have to depend on those fossil burning trucks to bring food into the grocery store that Costco can sell it to you at a high rate.
Right.
And if those trucks didn't come in, the semis that didn't come into the stores for 3 days, those stores would be empty.
If that. Yep. 3 days or less even. It'll empty them right out.
But people don't realize that. They just gripe about them semis being in the way and also stinking trucks and whatever.
Yeah. No, I say it is a blessing to be able to be raised on a farm, and grateful for all of the work that you've done and that your father did before you and that my father did after you to provide that opportunity for me to grow up in this setting. Anything else you'd like to throw in there before we wrap up, Grandpa?
Oh, I can't think of too much else other than, was blessed for the opportunity of coming back to the farm. Yeah. And it was just, but one of the things that probably as far as being blessed is I was very fortunate in the wife that I chose, or she chose me, or whatever it might be. But she's someone who can do something. Yeah. We have a nice garden. We have, she's able to sew. She's able to, very musical, do a lot of things, very well educated. Yeah. And education is a big part of it.
You bet. Say you marry
if you could get the right education.
Right. Say you marry the right lady, and the rest kind of takes care of itself.
It is so very, very important. Yes. And that was one of the things that my father was very concerned about was who his descendants would marry.
Right. Absolutely. Yep. It's a big deal. I spend all day, every day working in genetics, and it's not just cows that applies to. Yeah. No, and anyway, I'm grateful for you, Grandpa, and appreciate all the work that you've done. And I'm inspired by the example that Grandpa Joe set, that you set, and that my dad set. And I'm proud to be a Christensen and carry it on my chest everywhere I go.
Well, that's good. It's good to have the name continue on.
You bet. Thanks so much for taking the time, Grandpa. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Got Any Cows podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. And visit us anytime at gotanycows.com.